All right. Today we're here with Chaz Davis. This is Black, Blind, and Elite series, part three of the series. And just to really review for people that haven't seen the other ones, the series is all about. My vision has always been to get people to see the world and look at the world through a different set of eyes than their own. Mostly, or it has been to with respect to the blind, vision impaired community and people with disabilities. But now with the Black Lives Matter movement going on, I think it's really challenged myself to look through a different set of eyes and really look at through my own vision, um, and try to look at the world and try to understand the world that people of color live in. So I've chosen to have to speak with people that are not only Black but blind and elite athletes themselves to kind of get their experiences, with being someone that's Black but also being someone that's blind, and so to try to see that they have encountered more or less or maybe no different discrimination than somebody that's just Black or just someone that has no apparent disability. So today I'm with Chaz Davis. Chaz is an amazing endurance runner. What's your fastest marathon, Chaz?
2:31.
Yeah, he's way faster than me. He's a Paralympian. And what's your fastest 1500 meters?
3:58.
So just to give an idea for everyone, this guy is he's a machine and he's a superstar. So, but let's get right into the questions, Chaz. So you have a little bit of a different story than the other people that I've spoken to in that you come from a mixed race mom and dad, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So my mom's white and my dad is Black.
Okay. And so that kind of maybe can create maybe different scenarios than others that are purely one or the other, from family parents that are both Black or both white. And so the first question, and my last guest D'Artagnan kind of helped even me to maybe describe things even or use different terminology. Is would you, in being somebody that's a person of color, would the descriptor Black versus African American, is that something that either offends you or bothers you, or one versus the other you choose? In addition to that, would you rather be designated, I guess, a person of color versus one of or the other of those?
I'll start off by saying, as a biracial person, I think I've always struggled with identity. And so growing up in school in a mostly white town, I definitely had that struggle. And then, I heard people call me all different terms. Some people even thought that I was Hispanic, so just that idea of identity was always an issue. But when we're talking about Black or African American, for me, that's part of my identity. So I personally don't get offended by either term. I think that it's important to look at the historical context of terms. If you were to group people together and call, let's say, the Blacks, or something along those terms, I think you just have to look at the connotation of the term, how it's meant to be portrayed, and what's being conveyed by that. And was it used at one time to bring people down? Of course, there are more degrading words out there, but I think that as far as for me personally, I think Black and African American are both accurate descriptors for me. But I am biracial too, so I have kind of both of those identities. So I think it's kind of interesting to really find my own identity. But I think when I was in high school is when I really started to identify with being a Black person.
Yeah, I think that's well. There's two parts of your response that I really like. Is that uh, I think, and you understand this, and I understand this a lot too. Is that a lot of times it's really we get too caught up in the semantics of terms and specific words that we use, and it's really more about how you treat people and not what you exactly refer them as.
Hmm.
So I actually, there was this whole movement on trying to designate people with disabilities or visual impairments as a a person with a visual impairment and all that. And uh, I really, to me, it's, you can call me blind, visually impaired. It's fine. I think it does have to do with your degree to which you come to grips with your disability, visual impairment, or come to grips with your condition. You maybe come to grips with your identity in this situation. But you can call me. I'm fine with somebody saying, he's blind, but it's not what they call me. It's how they say it and how they treat me versus the actual specific terminology. Is where I think that sometimes people get caught up in. Well, if you use the right semantics, but you treat them as though they're not capable of doing something, or they're totally different, or not um, equal, then it doesn't really matter what you call them. So.
Yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. I will say though that language, I think language really does matter, and it influences people's perspectives. So if you're someone that if there's someone out there that uses the word colored to describe someone, let's say, you got to look at the historical context of that word. What did that mean? I think it's deep rooted in segregation. So I think words do matter, but sometimes I feel as though we get too caught up, like you said, in the semantics, in the words, in really policing the words, and making sure that we avoid certain terms when we're talking about a group of people, and it really diverts the focus, I think, from what we really should be focusing on, and that's making that meaningful change.
Mhm. So would you say um, you'd rather see the beginning of use more of uh, people of color, because that maybe can take away and make sure that it's not inferring uh, blacks came from Africa, because they may well have not. They may have came from any other country and just be it might maybe a person of color, or do you think that that puts more emphasis on the colored part that you're referring to of maybe bad historic viewpoint?
Yeah, I think that person of color is really all encompassing. So it could really refer to Hispanic people, um, really any ethnicity that is a person of color. And I think each group might face racism, discrimination, things along those lines, and have different feelings and about the verbiage and what's being said. But at the same time, I think, like other people of color, even if they're not black or African American, I think there's definitely still racism and discrimination that's faced. And so it might be a little bit different, but I think uh, when we just don't know what to say, I think person of color is something that really would apply to a lot of different situations and a lot of groups of people that are facing a lot of the social injustices that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic and whatnot, and you've probably come with this same issue before. And this probably helps us as blind, visually impaired community. Is that a lot of times, I do have some vision and I can see colors and whatnot, but everything's blurry, and so. Um, uh, there's many times when even somebody that's close up that I can see uh, their figure and see, a little bit of details. Like even for example, for you, I think at one point I had to ask somebody even before I was doing this interview, like I could get mixed up with whether you were, you know, some Latino versus mixed black, white, um, and so I think that whole aspect of race can kind of, maybe we, as people with visual impairments, we don't really see that, so it maybe even helps in that we treat people more equal, just in general, because we don't maybe have the vision necessarily to really tell race.
Yeah, when we're looking at that purely on the visual side of things, I absolutely agree with that. I think that race is even deeper than that. It's cultural as well, and I think even as blind or visually impaired people, we still do see the culture. We still are influenced by the way that people treat other people based on race, and so we do see that, even if we're not seeing if that person is black or white. And I think so that might be important. If we're meeting someone for the first time, we might not have those preconceived biases that, hey, we do have them. We do have biases, and we might not have those upon meeting someone if there are certain other cultural factors that are missing. So a lot of people equate the way that people talk with race and things like that, and that's something that triggers the brain to think, oh, well, that person might be, and you start to wonder, is that person black, is that person whatever. We as people want to put other people in boxes in order to kind of categorize them and be able to remember them. So I think that's kind of the way that I look at that.
Yeah, totally. I think, more so the way I was even thinking of it as was completely, people, you look at a picture, you see somebody meet for somebody for the first time, and uh, we as people that are vision impaired, um, probably tend to go to our friends and like, hey, is that person this whatever, if you ever wanted to know. I don't think, I mean, it's not something that it really matters to me. I don't even really care, because I really, I try to make sure that I treat everyone, uh, you know, equally, or the same as everyone else. But I think when you have somebody that has full vision, I think we live in such a visually focused world that I think people probably immediately see, a group of people or whatnot, and they already know the the race. There's so much more that goes involved, like you say, with culture and all that kind of stuff, and I think that's what this is all about, is understanding, not just black or white, but understanding the culture and understanding how people think, of different races and act, and all of that. Um, so the next question, would be, as somebody with disability, or being blind, is there any instances that you remember, in school, or recently, or any time that you were discriminated against specifically again, by your disability?
So for me, I went blind at age 20. So most of my life I didn't have that experience. So I think a lot of the discrimination that people get growing up through school, that's not something that I faced purely based on my disability, but it did happen to me in college. And I think I kind of went under the radar a little bit when I first did lose my vision, and I wasn't supported in the ways that I feel like my counterparts were being supported in the academic sense. So oftentimes what others got in terms of access to materials, things like that, I just didn't have that access, and I didn't realize how important and how taken for granted that is until I was put into that situation. But so I think a lot of it is really about the inaccessibility to really life in general. But then when we're also looking at the way that I've been treated as a blind person in a negative way, I think just the low expectations. A lot of people have low expectations, and if you do something that I see as a mundane task, some people might look at that as inspirational. I'm crossing the street. That's inspirational to someone. That's what I've been told, and oh, I'm going to work. That's inspirational. That's something that I think most people aspire to do or do. It's something that we have to do because that's how you get by in life. And so I think those low expectations really in the beginning kind of influenced the way that I saw myself as a blind person, 6 or 7 years ago when I first became blind. But since then, I've kind of been able to go through this reclamation period to reclaim my identity as a blind person and not really feed into those low expectations as much and set way higher expectations and higher, more lofty goals for myself. And, I think, yeah, I'm blind. Yeah, I have some difficulties, but I can still set goals and exceed what others think of me because I think of myself as that much more.
Totally agree with you. We um, are totally capable of amazing things. We just need that kind of uh, bridge. We people. One person told me we have discontinuous ability. We have amazing ability, and then there's these spots where we may feel like we may not be able to do things, and all we need really is that bridge, and really that accommodations and adaptations that we make are the bridge to allowing us to do things and do whatever everyone else is able to do that doesn't have the same sort of disability. Unfortunately, some of the accommodations and accessibility are not, we're not able to keep up with the ever changing aspects of society that it does can make it difficult, just with keeping up because of the some of the accessibility is not always there. So
Certainly.
but now on the other side, being a person of color, is there any instances that you feel that you've been discriminated against with that? And on top of that, being mixed, would you say you're less or more discriminated against? Because I could see you even getting stared or uh, pinpointed from even blacks potentially.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think for me, like I said before, growing up in a town that was mostly white, I still was one of the few minorities. So even, I am light skinned, but I think I still was one of the few minorities. So I was treated differently, I think, based on that too. And so, I remember a time when so this is back when I was driving because I did see prior to
Mhm.
age, 19 or 20. So I think I was about 17 years old. I was pulled over, not even sure why I was pulled over. The police officer came up with his gun drawn and told me to get out of the car. That was it. And there wasn't any I did there was any provocation there. I don't know what really led to that, but he told me to get out, search me, and then had me there for maybe I don't know, 5, 10, 15 minutes while he sat in the car, came back and just told me to go. But, to have that gun pulled on me for the first time for not really understanding why that was happening, I think was really indicative of how I felt others viewed me, because prior to that, I don't think I really thought that so much could happen to me because of my race necessarily, even though, my dad always grew up telling me, there are certain rules you have to follow if you want to survive. If you're
Mhm.
driving, you have to follow a certain set of rules, just to be sure. And so I always did that. But, and there was still no discernible reason why that happened. I think it definitely could have been because of race, but it was a frightening experience for me. But then also in school, there was a theft from the cafeteria. And like I said, because we're mostly white school, I was sitting in the principal's office with the three other black kids in the school. And so to me, again, it was very telling that, they went and checked the cameras after, and it was actually a white person who did it and not a black person at all. But for all the black kids in the school to be called into the office, we really thought that race had to do with that. So of course there are those kind of instances, but I think there's so many more instances of inferential racism, the less overt, racism that's still just as damaging. I think that
Hmm.
that we kind of face every single day. And so, you know,
Yeah.
that could be being followed in a store, just where the stereotypes apply. So I think that's kind of um, something that we should really keep in mind too, not just the overt side of it.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's horrible to think that those type of things happen, and I think these are these type of instances is important for me to kind of hear too, because um, I think we often hear of instances that are instances where you know people are black get pulled over or treated unjustly and all that kind of stuff, and they have some sort of criminal history or something that they have done in the past. Not that they were anywhere near guilty of anything at the time, but hearing stories like uh, yours and whatnot, and talking to other people that have had these same sort of instances where you getting pulled over and a gun is drawn at you and you're not restrained, you're not doing anything or resisting, you're not doing anything wrong and whatnot. It's just it's opens my eyes that this stuff still is truly very existent and prevalent, and that's horrible.
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
we need to change that. So it with being black and blind, would you say you have been more or less or no differently discriminated against in your life? I know it's just been since you were 20 or so that you've actually lost your vision,
Mhm.
but
So I really would say that I think the discrimination picked up a little bit, but in different ways. So, you know, when we're talking about, you know, the lower expectations as a blind person, there are also lower expectations as a black person too. You know, and so I think when you're looking at all of those pieces and you combine them together, yeah, it feels like you have one more level to, you know, to being a minority, you know,
mhm,
whether it's a racial minority or being disabled, you have just one more kind of strike against you, I feel like. And so I would definitely say that like the things that I mentioned before, when they happen all in one day, and it could be because of your race, it could be because of your disability, I think it affects you in a similar way. um, and it kind of can make it difficult to get through the days sometimes, you know. And of course there's so many other stressors that I think people deal with that don't have these identities. And so
mhm.
when you put that all together, I think sometimes, yeah, it can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, and when that constant pounding, feeling like you're getting pounded, down, uh, can finally get to you and lead to depression and those type of things, which is very common, especially amongst people with disabilities. But I'm sure people, of color, um, then you start really believing that the world is more against you, even more so.
Right, absolutely.
So that can be pretty challenging. So there's definitely been those days where they say when it rains it pours, and everything just seems to be going the wrong way, even though you feel like you're trying to do everything right. For me, so I can't even imagine for you and people in your similar situation that deal with that. So, um,
Hmm.
so both of you and I have been on Team USA and represented our country in the Paralympic Games in Rio, and so the IOC is uh, came down with a pretty harsh stance over the years of trying to exclude um, uh, any sort of political stances and stuff like that in the games and award ceremonies and things like that. And I totally understand it from a perspective of safety, because there's a lot of countries that have hatred towards each other, and we might have more terrorist attacks and more sort of danger around that if everyone is able to display sort of their political stance on things. But with all that's going on in the kind of uh, even amongst all around the world, not just in the U.S. Now, it's becoming very brought to the forefront. Kind of discrimination and injustices. Would you say that it would be a good idea or not a good idea to change that? Do you think they should allow political stances in the games, or do you think it should be left to really focusing still on the sports?
I think that really having political protests in an Olympic Games is not that's not the place for it. I look at what's going on in terms of racial tensions as more a humanitarian issue. And so then, that brings up the question, well, where's that line? Where's that line drawn? But in terms of demonstrations in general, I'm not entirely sure it's the place. I think the awareness is there. I think at this point, if people have access to media across the world, they know what's going on here in the United States, and this has been going on in the United States. This is not a new thing that started with George Floyd, you know. But I think a lot of people equate these protests to George Floyd, but I think this is an issue that's existed for, you know, since we got here to
Hmm.
what's America now. And so, I would say that I personally don't really have an issue with it. But I think even in 2016, the silver medalist in the marathon from Ethiopia,
Hmm.
he held his hands over his head in an X to protest what was going on in the political sphere in Ethiopia at the time. And I think that was taken. Um, I think people really latched onto it, and there wasn't really much negativity that came along with it. But I can see how there could be, and I don't think that it would be as beneficial to do that necessarily, considering where we're at worldwide right now.
Yeah, yeah. Does that at all representing your country, in the Paralympic Games, but also um, being being someone that's dealt with and um, been discriminated against and whatnot, and dealt with racial issues. Would you say that does that make you look different when you see the flag?
To me, the flag represents the United States of America, the freedom that I have living here in this country. I mean, it just you can't compare it to really living anywhere else. Like we absolutely have more freedoms than other countries. I don't ever lose sight of that. I think the flag represents what it represents. When people kneel for the anthem, it's not disrespecting the flag. There's no disrespect there. I view that as really being able to respectfully, actually, because that all came about from a soldier saying, instead of sitting it out in the locker room, why don't you kneel for it? That's a better sign of respect. So I think it's bringing awareness to an issue while still showing a decency and respect while doing that. So I think when I look at the flag, I see all the freedoms and all of the good that we do have in America. But America is a broken place, and we have a long way to go in order
Hmm.
to in order to mend that.
Yeah. What do you think as what do you think um, p- we can do in terms of what can white Americans do and what can Black Americans do to help uh, maybe not even remedy but just improve this issue with the hopes of at some point seeing equity and uh, amongst races.
So I think it really starts, on the non person of color side, is really being able to have an open mind, listen, and educate. And so that the education can come from documentaries, can come from reading books, it can come from having conversations like this, listening to people that have lived experience, and just really keeping that open mind. I think the less challenging that there is in the beginning, of course, like, yeah, I think the pendulum has to really swing both ways in order for it to land somewhere where we want it to be. So, like, I think there's a very aggressive approach, or at least there was a very aggressive approach with wanting to defund the police, and some people took that one way, other people took that differently. But I think really making actual action, and so focusing on better, policing, so community policing and being more involved in the community. I think having police forces that are more representative of that community, building more trust. I think criminal justice reform in general is these are things, tangible things that we can be focusing on. I think more affordable healthcare, just things that really are prominent issues in our communities. And I think we're talking a pretty big game right now, but I think the biggest thing is to be able to back that up and support that with
Hmm.
tangible action items. And so, I think we're still working that out. I don't think there's a clear plan, there's a clear agenda to get there at this point. But I think it's encouraging that we're having these conversations. I think it's encouraging that there are white allies that are having these conversations, making coalitions, trying to better their communities while still listening and respecting the experiences that people of color are living every single day. So, I think it's important not to undermine what people of color are going through, but still be a good ally in helping to further that cause and improve those injustices.
Yeah. Chaz, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat with me about these things. I think that's purely the reason I'm doing this is to really call my own self out and make sure that I'm accountable and educating myself and wanting to learn more about the race, culture, and everything that you're a part of. So thanks so much for allowing me to talk to you about this, and hopefully you enjoyed it. But just keep doing what you're doing. Are you still going for Tokyo?
I am, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
just trying to find what that qualifying race will be, and hopefully I'll be there.
Nice. Well, I hope I'm there with you. And Chaz is
Definitely.
works with the Massachusetts Association with the Blind, and a big part of Team with a Vision, which is a team of blind and vision impaired individuals, along with their guides, who are essential for our success. Most of the time with the Boston Marathon, this time it being virtual. So I know you're really busy with that right now. So I'll let you go. But thanks so much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate the chat.
Take care.
Take care.